Thank you, DAG, for this spectacular showing of the works here after Delhi. Ashish, I'm very happy and grateful to be able to work with your archive. Thank you, Ritu, and your team for being really collegial and good-spirited in all the work that we've done together and the beautiful catalogue that DAG has brought out. I hope many of you will see it. For me, as a contemporary art curator, the question was, why Kali? Why now? Of course, there is Kali as darkness, which I hope we will discuss in some depth today, but also she is Kal, she is time. And the fact that she appears to dominate the imagination of divinity, the imagination of what mythology could possibly contain in the last 200 years. I think this needed some sort of explication. Fortunately, the collection covers more than 400 or 500 years. There are stray pieces which go back to the 1700s. And I think we could sort of look at them and examine this journey of Kali. Now, it's extraordinary that she who is described as a minor goddess becomes this dominant force, certainly in the last 200 years and towards the end of the colonial period. Can we have the first slide, please? How does this happen? It would appear that Kali inadvertently is projected onto the national stage. Would you like to dim the main lights? No? Is that all right for you to see? Kali is projected onto the national stage with a great potency by the acts of the British. It is unintentional, it is unintended, but then that is in the nature of Kali. If we look at the body and we see how she is represented, this was an image that appeared on a tract which was talking about political trouble fomented in India. And it's from the early 20th century. By this time, the partition of Bengal has been attempted in 1905. There have been riots. There have been thousands and thousands of people collecting outside the Kali temple in 1905 in protest against this act. So James Campbell Kerr, the writer of this tract, has no hesitation in attributing rebellion to Kali. If we look at her, we see that it contains, this was a popular chromolithograph, but it contains many of the elements which become profoundly associated with her iconography: dark skin, projecting tongue, an abundance of loose hair, which is not very well understood because that is not how main goddesses are represented. The nude body, just the severed hands as a girdle on the waist, but otherwise she's completely nude. Passive Shiva, fair passive Shiva. This is not your North Indian Shiva of muscularity, energy, deep spiritual sort of contemplation. This is a Shiva which was sort of apparently given up, or is allows Kali to trample freely over the ground that she so chooses. The next image, please. At the same time, Kali, even if she is seen as by the British as an agent provocateur for rebellion, she also masters the art of the popular market. This is a very interesting print also from Bengal. We can see that she's placed in a hellish kind of a situation. There is decapitated heads, bodies, the same fair, prone body of Shiva, the garland that she wears of decapitated heads, and there is then this text which says, if you improve of the manufacture of national products, if the welfare of the nation's poor laborers is your concern, if you have a sense of good and bad, then, oh Hindu brothers, smoke these Kali cigarettes. So Kali bidi, Kali soaps, Kali baby milk food, Kali as a sort of an agent for the circulation of popular goods. So the talk today is going to address some of these concerns, this vertical oscillation that she's able to command as a Brahminical deity, as a deity who captures the imagination of writers like Aurobindo, Subhash Bose, Rabindranath, etc., and also in the south, Subramanya Bharati, and then Also her presence in the common marketplace, the lowest common denominators, so to speak. Next, please. Where does Kali emanate from? Many of us know her as, she is of course Durga's sort of, she's Durga's go-to person in acts of war and confrontation. This is of course the reference to the Devi Mahatmayam, 5th century text from the Markandeya Puran. And this is the core of Shakta belief, where Devi becomes the primordial, supreme factor. I mean, she is the unchallenged ruler and maker of the world. Here, Durga is fighting with Chand and Mund, the two asuras, and they are challenging her. In rage, her forehead turns dark. And I mean, we can give you a lot of quotes, but it will take up a lot of time. So I'll just quickly go through the images. And Kali is born. And Kali, the dark one, is described in the Mahatmayam as gaunt, sagging breasts, covered only with the khal of the leopard or the cheetah, hideous, fanged, lolling tongue, and supremely effective. You know, I would ask you all to analyze, because this is one of the things that comes up. Shiva, Vishnu, even Durga always need sometimes the aid of another god. For Durga, it is always Kali. Kali comes to her aid. So we know that through the Mahatmayam, in the fight with the various asuras, there is Madhu Kaitav, there is Chand and Mund, Sum Nisum, Rakt Bij. Again and again, Kali appears to settle scores, and she does it with startling and dramatic efficacy. I would urge you, if you're in Delhi and are interested in Kali iconography, to see this painting in the National Museum where she is tackling Rakt Bij. Rakt Bij is extraordinary because in the fight with the 7 mothers, the Sapta Matrakas, every time somebody cuts the body and a drop of blood falls on the ground, another Rakt Bij is born. And Durga in frustration calls Kali. So that painting shows the tongue of Kali sweeping across the entire surface of the work, because that's what she's doing. She's just consuming evil, consuming the potential for destruction. And extraordinarily, there is great humility even in such violence. Kali doesn't restore. When we read in the Mahatmayam about Durga, when Durga finishes with the asuras, Jalashai, the fires that have been burning, the vegetation which has shriveled up, the waters which have dried out, are all restored. That is the great act of Devi. She's restorative. You go back to status quo ante. Kali does none of that. She comes as literally as a general in arms, so to speak. She fights alone. And she restores what Durga wants her to do. As we see here, Mahadevi, you asked for this, and here they are, Chand and Mund. Next, please. One of the most beautiful folios which celebrate the power of Kali, of course, is the Basoli paintings. For 60 years, this school of art flourished in the Himachal area, and it's on the Silk Route. Here we see Mahadevi as Siddhalakshmi, quaffing wine, as they say, and Kali and she are just having a goodly natter. There's a lovely painting even in this collection where Kali is walking, she's turning around and chatting with Durga, who's on her lion. So this sense of a feminine cohort, we see this with Kali. Kali as one of the 7 flames in Jwalamukhi. She's the first flame. Kali with the Mahavidyas, the 10 Mahavidyas. In that story, we'll come to that a little bit later, but she's the first Mahavidya. And Kali as the assistant to Durga. So this is her role. She works with a female cohort. And we know that even Durga Devi is born when there is a failure of male agency. When the gods fail, you need a feminine agent. And from Durga, then the Mahavidyas are born. From Durga, the Saptamatrakas, and so on. Next, please. This is a Kangra painting, which is, the hills usually show her, the hill paintings often show her as a beautiful, highly, she's beautiful, she's youthful. There's Shiva who is obviously got the erotic attraction towards Devi. And the aesthetics of the charnel house is quite different from what or the charnel house which she occupies as her house, is completely different from what we will see elsewhere. Next, please. Look at this. From the transformation from the youthful, pliable body of Kali in Kangra, and even in the rest of the hill folios, you have the heavy, buxom, maternal Kali of Bengal. What has happened? In the 1650s, Krishnananda Agambagish, a tantric, apparently steps out of his house. This is the popular belief. Steps out of his house. He's desperately trying to visualize Kali. Please remember that there are no temples, etc., which sort of monumentalize Kali or imprison, impale her in the public imagination. Kali is not a Vishnu or a Shiva. She doesn't have those, those kind of monuments haven't been built to her. And Agambagish sees a milkmaid. She's buxom, she's putting cow pats on the wall, her hair is open, she sees him and apparently she sticks out her tongue in embarrassment. That's that's a popular story, it's probably unlikely. But Agambagish then fixes her in the Bengali poetic imagination as dark, erotic, maternal, indifferent. These are some of the qualities. And the poet himself can become like a small boy, literally begging for the mother's indulgence. Here we see this is the popular, it's a fantastic work and it's really a privilege to be able to show it. But we see all the aspects of Kali that then arouse, especially in the 20th century, the Western imagination. Her darkness, is that evil? And this is, of course, the Western belief in Lucifer falling. I would interpret it like this. Lucifer falls from the heavens into the darkness of hell. The tongue that is sticking out. Ramakrishna in his Tabandha says that is because she says you should taste all the pleasures of the world. The Mundamala of the garland that she wears of 51 heads, those are the alphabets. So these are the tantric interpretations that Kali actually isn't just the image of violence or disruption. She's actually, she's a conveyor of aspects of art and of art and of literature as well. These other things that we are seeing, we can see the patron's influence, the halo, the gold jewelry. These come later to Kali, but these were obviously the works that were being commissioned by the wealthy classes. Next, please. The other thing that's happening now is the vilification of Kali. We've spoken about that a little bit earlier. This is a work by Saltykov, and it's a very telling work. The Thagi tradition has become established in the British imagination. Kali is believed to be the leader of the thugs. Who are the thugs? The thugs are phansigars, or the ones who commit phansi. They catch hold of traveling merchants and British troops and they decapitate them. I'm not giving you all the references, but I'd be happy to share it with anybody who's interested. This has been absolutely roundly challenged by Indian scholars. What the British did do was try to plot India through the various surveys, archaeological, geological, and so on. They document the peoples of India, 1868 to 1872 or something. All the communities. What they can't always do is to plot the itinerant communities, and that's where a lot of the robbery, etc., takes place. But Dr. Doshi is here, so she will know. There is the first reference to the thugs is in Jain Prakrit literature. There is Kumarachalit Palita. That is the text which mentions it first, and there is no mention of Kali. Then there are several other texts which come up, and there is no. So Surdas speaks of Kali and of Krishna as a thug, who is who chori kar deta hai gopiyon ka dil. So that is there is no direct association between Kali and Thagi except until Lord Bentinck and the British decide that this should be so. So this is a nightly procession, it's being taken out and obviously meant to strike fear in the hearts of the British. Next, please. We know that one of the things that Krishna Agambagish does is to establish Kali Puja, first in Nabadweep and thereafter in Bengal even today, the day before Diwali there is Kali Puja. and this is her immersion. But again, really a lovely work by Balthasar Solvins. And you can see the Orientalist influence. On the boat, there is a temple, there is a god, there are street creatures, there is vegetation. This is meant to please the European imagination, which believes in the monstrous East. Next, please. And then there is, in comparison to the tradition of the thug, in comparison to the belief of the vile influence of Kali, there is Ramakrishna. Ramakrishna follows in the line of the poets and the spiritual believers that come down from a Gambagish. But there is in the middle, there is Bhama Kepa, then there is Ram Prasad, and an efflorescence of poetry, of passionate engagement with the Divine Mother, who will be compassionate, who will be loving, who will be protective, and the male poet sort of beseeching her indulgence. Ramakrishna, I think, is born in 1832. When he's only 16 years old, he must come to Calcutta with his elder brother because the family is extremely poor. It's a Brahmin family. He seeks work in a Kali temple. The older brother dies. This moves the young Ramakrishna to search for Kali. Now, how does he do this? He does this in the most secular and interesting way through the study of Jainism, Buddhism, Islam, Christianity, looking for the answers. And for him, the answer is precisely what he thought it was, Kali. Rani Rashmoni, one of the elites of Kolkata at that time, builds this temple for him. And there Kali is housed, and that is the Dakshineshwar temple. And of course, then Ramakrishna's teaching spread. There is a wonderful coincidence of dates. Ramakrishna becomes very established as a savant. His writings are going out. They are being published by the popular presses. The Congress Party holds its first meeting in 1885. And there is then this osmotic exchange we will see between politics and religion. The other thing that is of a striking nature is his brahmacharya. He will not engage with his wife in any way, with Sharada Devi, and she also then becomes a saint. The chromolithograph presses of Calcutta are producing these works at great speed, and they are spreading across the country. And Ramakrishna's his faith then becomes restricted not only to Bengal, but even further. Next, please. The Dasa Mahavidyas. I don't know how many of you are familiar with them, but in any study of Devi, the understanding of her cohort is very important. So the story, of course, is related to Shiva. Shiva is not invited to Daksha's sacrifice. The entire cosmos is invited, even the smallest blade of grass. And Daksh, who is the father of Sati, ridicules him as, he's a kapal. He eats out of a skull, etc. He's wanders around like a mendicant. Shiva tries to stop Sati from going because he feels she will be insulted, which is what happens. And to restrain Shiva, Sati in her anger then gives birth to the Mahavidyas. But look at the, of course, the first one is Kali and the rest follow. There is Dhumavati, there is Chinnamasta, and they all have a very profoundly articulated feminine identities. All of them have their own mantras. They have a very well developed religious discourse around them. This is Kali Ghat painting. So just to speak about the popularity of how this imagery is spreading in the early 20th century. Next, please. These are prints of the Mahavidyas, again in the Bengali popular presses. Next, please. And then the influence spreading beyond. If we consider what are the social classes who are in, I have to say that the prism for this talk is the social and the political aspects of of worship of Kali and how this spreads. We are not really engaging with either the texts or the rituals. But the interesting thing is how her worship then enters into the Santhal movement, the states of Jharkhand, what we call now Jharkhand, Bihar, Odisha, Bengal. The marginal in a sense. The ones who are outside the pale of the Brahminical approach Kali. Kali is seen as the instrument of entering into the power structures of Hinduism because she's just so accessible. Jitu Santal in 1926 converts from his tribal faith to Hinduism, and there is a statement which is recorded. He does this with the help of a Congress worker, and he says, if I have a sip of the waters of the Ganga and if I worship Kali, I can now enter the temples. This is of course the movement right through the 20th century of we see this with the Dalit movements as well as of the tribals of wanting entry into Hindu temples. Next please. Kali's imagery entering into the art schools of Calcutta, I think Lahore, Chennai, and this is the kind of work that was being done. Shiva looking more like John the Baptist, wild, unkempt, wanderer, so to speak. But Kali's the representation of Kali captures the artistic imagination. That's what I'm trying to show you. Next, please. Another Kali, again in the academic style. The tongue has gone back, she's sort of cleaned up. The mundamala is only being used to cover her own nudity. The body of Shiva is that of a Western figure, but again, passive and lying at her feet. Next, please. Bahuchara. Bahuchara I bring in because her association with Kali at Pavagadh in Gujarat is a very important association. In the temple there are three deities. There is Kali, Kalika and Bahuchara. Bahuchara is the goddess of the Charans, who are not a high caste, and they were very much the people on the margins. So when their Devi approximates Kali and comes into this fold, we can see the churn in the Hindu social fabric, so to speak. And there is an elaborate story of Bahuchara. Here she is seen with two of the Bhairavs, the Gora Bhairav and the Kala Bhairav. She's on a rooster. And when the Charans are attacked, there is a story about how a Charan community is attacked. Look at the sexual associations. The women cut off their breasts in protest. There is an attack on the community. I'm giving you bilkul mota. The women cut off their breasts, and the men are rendered, by Bahuchara, the men are rendered impotent. And the only way that they can come back into some kind of fold is when they dress like women. So I think it's a highly sophisticated, contemporary, interesting story. Now, Bahuchara is of course then the titular goddess of the LGBTQ plus community, and here she is next to Kali of Pavagadh. Also in this temple there was a Sufi saint's shrine, but that has been removed in the last 20-30 years and put away. Next please. South India, Kali in South India, Bhadrakali. How much time do I have, please? I've been talking for some time and I might be eating into your time. But these are the kinds of images that we have of Kali with, certainly in the southern states of Karnataka, and Tamil Nadu, and Kerala, she is profoundly important. The imagery rests around the Bhadra or the good Kali, and the good Kali is restorative. Again we see, next please, these are wooden works, but these are photographs. That is a photograph by Pepita Seth as well as here, and this is Teyyam. And we've been talking about the sexual fluidity or the gender fluidity that a goddess like Kali enables. So these performances are done by lower caste men, communities which are empowered because they are in the religious cycles becoming empowered by their turning into the goddess. When they do the elaborate makeup and appear as the goddess, they are profoundly divine. They perform in the homes of the wealthy Nayars, the Nambudris, the high caste, in their kavus, in their sacred groves, in their shrines, and the same high caste will take their blessings, etc. And but thereafter they have to return to their supposedly low caste status. And interestingly, the communist parties have given them a certain amount of social valence and bring them into their marches, processions, etc. But this is the grandeur of Bhadrakali. There are 64 major Kali temples in Kerala, and we can talk more, but I think there is an element of time. Next, please. The transformative breastplate. I think this is such a fabulous work. It's what the man will wear when he becomes Devi. And This is an essential part of the costumery, apart from the makeup. Next, please. Because of the challenge to Kali by the British as the goddess of the thugs, the Thuggy Act, she is banned, etc., there has to be a blowback. The blowback actually comes most interestingly within the national movement. So, from the art historical pieces, this is probably the last work that I want to show you. We saw this in the 10 Mahavidyas. One of them is Chinnamasta, the severance of the Devi's. She severs her own head, the blood spouts out, and it goes into the mouths of her, her two servitors on either side. Subhash Bose, Aurobindo, I don't want to give you the quotes, it's a fairly lengthy quote, but in Jugantar, Aurobindo Ghosh and his brother Barindra start to say that we must worship Kali. We know Ananda Mat has been published by Bankim Chandra. The elevation of the goddess as inspiration, the equation of the body of the nation and the body of the goddess has now been established. And Subhash Bose actually goes even a step further. He suggests that by devoting yourself to Durga and to Kali, there is a purity of intent, and your entire desires, your energies are only then dedicated to sacrifice for the nation. So this is the kind of popular poster that comes into, circulation. Next, please. I move into this wall, more or less, which is really the contemporary figures. We don't realize, but there are many equivalences between the rise of what we call the modern and what we see as pretty much a certain kind of culmination of political intent by the late 1940s. This is K.G. Subramanian. K.G. Subramanian is born in 1924. He's already a young man of 23. He's familiar, he's growing up in Shantiniketan. He's very familiar with this movement. He's got a left inclination. Look at this. Here he's presenting an Ardhanari. It's a two-headed Ardhanari, maybe a Shiva and a Shakti, the Trishul, and an emaciated Mahish. And he's painted these plates, and we have it right up here on the wall on my left, which you can see. Next work, please. Satish Gujral. There is again the coincidence of artists who have gone through the terrors of partition and who understand that this terrible bloodletting must have its apotheosis in a certain sense. Satish Gujral used to drive with his, hearing deformity. He drove a truck from Jhelum in now present-day Pakistan to Jalandhar in Punjab, ferrying people, and he saw the extreme violence of what happened during the Punjab partition. And the stylistic elements are interesting. Gujral has been in Mexico, where he studies under Orozco. This is the burnt wood, so the anger and the rage that the man is able to project, but also then the totemic influence of Mexican art and the projecting tongue. It's a fantastic work of art. Next, please. Nirod Mazumdar, also an artist who's influenced very much by the West. He goes to he goes to Paris, and École de Paris got a great influence on him. But when he returns, it is to Bengal, to his native Bengal, and then the tantric element becomes dominant in his imagination. This is not exactly a Shri Yantra, this is not exactly even a Kali Yantra, this is Nirod Mazumdar's sort of presentation to the goddess. And there are a number of his paintings, I think in the DAG collection, also which represent Devi, her lion, in a more Saumya kind of way, in a more... it's more agreeable, it's not violent. So Devi capturing the imagination. And there's, for anybody who's interested, there's a wonderful book on Nirod Majumdar and his paintings of Tripur Sundari by Gayatri Spivak. Next, please. A very lovely, naive sort of work by K.S. Kulkarni. Next, please. This is by Reddeppa Naidu. So the regional variations on how Kali can be represented. Look at the pinched waist. Reddeppa is a Tamil Tamil artist from Cholamandalam, and you can see the Chola influence of the sculpture, but there is a flattening, there is a simplification, there are some elements of yantras that he's brought into it, and the graphic quality of Kali, sort of multiplier effect so to speak. You know, when we were doing this exhibition, what struck me is how Kali's major temples seem to be pushed to the extremes. Kashmir, Bengal, Kerala, Gujarat. What about Madhya Bharat? What's happening over here? But by 1947-48, when there is this great social churn, Kali seems to be returning with not even any intention, but she then reappears in many artists' work. Next, please. This is the great Chitto Prasad, whom many of you will know for having done the work on Hungry Bengal, 1943, the famine, the Great Bengal famine. He sent out by P.C. Joshi, etc., the Communist Party leaders to record, and he brings out this book, Hungry Bengal. But look at this woodcut, which he has dedicated maybe to Durga Devi, because she's astride her lion. But the quality of, devotion is very visible in the bhav, in the face of the Devi, and the extreme attention with which the woodcut has been made. Next, please. This is a student, Chhatrapati is a wonderful student of K.G. Subramanian, and the first time we saw this work, we thought this is K.G. It has the kind of, street energy, the kind of raunchiness which you can expect from K.G. Subramanian. Men lying lazily on the bed, maybe in some gully in Calcutta, she with her scythe ready to hit somebody. There's another Kali going in another direction at the back. And that kind of domestication, if you like, or the popularizing of the figure of the goddess. Next, please. M.F. Hussain. Why wouldn't he make Kali? But he makes her corpulent, heavy, and she's got ghungroos. So maybe she's a dancing Kali. Next, please. This is the last slide, as it should be. A Muslim artist based in Bombay, Tayyab Mehta, profoundly influenced by Kali, and he sees the equivalence between the rising violence, the 1984 riots, his own witnessing of the 1947 riots, where he saw, people jumping from buildings and dying as they fell on the street. 1989, Bhagalpur communal violence. And between 1984 till his end, I think in 2005, he continues to present Kali as just the flavor of the moment, just the flavor of violence that was overtaking the country. I'll end here. Thank you.
Thank you, Gayatri. Now for Devdutt Pattanaik.
Should we stand so that I think they can see us? Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. So we can.
So what we've done is, we're relying upon Devdutt's tremendous mythic imagination and knowledge to be able to explain some things. And I've got a few questions for him, which we're just going to go through. Would you like to talk about Kali's place in the spectrum of feminine energy? Because that's some of the things we've been looking at, and her different manifestations through the narrative.
So, this is one of the most fantastic presentations I've seen in a very long time. So,
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
It's really, really wonderful work over time and space. I think she deserves you see, when you see a mythological work, there are two ways to look at it. One is to see it literally, and one is to see it metaphorically. So when I see an image of a man, especially in Hindu art, does it represent a man or does it represent an idea? When I see a woman, do I see a woman or do I see an idea? Or maybe I see both. So one has to remember this basic, it's language. It's like poetry. When you read a poetry, do you read it literally or do you read it symbolically? And therefore, when you see a Kali image, it is part of a large mythic vocabulary. And the easy way to remember mythic vocabulary is to compare and contrast. Right? So for example, there's a beautiful image over there of Bahuchara Mata, and you saw Kal Bhairav and Gora Bhairav, right? So if you go to Delhi, and I'm just going to elaborate the answer so that it makes sense. So if you go to Delhi and you go to Purana Killa and you go to the Kal Bhairav temple, you can offer alcohol, right? So you can give alcohol to Kal Bhairav. But if you don't like this business of alcohol and dogs, you can just go a little beyond, and there is Gora Bhairav Mandir where you offer doodh, milk. So you suddenly have an extreme of alcohol on one side and doodh on the other, and it's sort of in modern Delhi right now, right? We can go there. This extreme is presented even in the feminine form through Kali and Gauri. So Gauri word is, is Gaura, white, and Kali, black. They are a spectrum. So if you go to Gauri temple or a Mangala Gauri temple, especially in Maharashtra, you will see flowers being offered, which is a veni or a thing to tie your hair. So you made a point about the unbound hair of the goddess. The unbound hair represents wilderness, where there is no cultivation, there is no domestication, where no human being has made its mark, and therefore completely free. And the domesticated goddess, whose hair is combed, plait has been made, she's turned into a knot, and you tie flowers around it, you put a Juda Mandala, so the whole thing. And I'll show you how powerful these images are, how they evoke. If you read the Ramayana, Sita's jewelry keeps falling as she goes towards Lanka. The only piece of jewelry which is left is her Judamani. So basically, which is her hairpin. And when she's sending it to Ram, she's saying that if this goes away, civilization will collapse. And in the Mahabharata, when Draupadi is humiliated, her hair is undone and she demands it be washed with blood. So although Kali is not present, she's being evoked. A world where decency is lost. At one level, a world where nature comes its primal form, where there is no civilization. So in the feminine spectrum, Gauri is at one end, Kali is at the other. In both cases, it's her own volition. She doesn't do it because someone has told her. She chooses to tie her hair. And that point, and to pull it yourself. Therefore, the stories of Ramayana and Mahabharata evoke hair a lot. And I thought I'll pick that point of the hair, because the unbound hair of Kali is, I think, the symbol of what we all yearn for, freedom. But the gaze comes in, and then we sort of comb our hair in the mornings. We tie our hair, and we all want to look good in front of people. And we sort of lose a little bit of the Kali, the freedom that she embodies. Because we live in society and we have people looking at us. And we have to costume ourselves like Gauri, hopefully. And somewhere between Kali and Gauri is Durga, who is both bride and warrior. So it's a spectrum that way. Yeah.
Okay, this is very interesting. Thank you. Why is she so dark? There is the Western fear of darkness, which we've talked about. And then in the Kalika, of the question of color, it's so important. Shiva looks admiringly at fair and beautiful apsaras like Urvashi, and then turns to his wife Uma/Kali and says disparagingly, "Oh Kali, you are black as spreading collyrium." Collyrium mane kajal. "And you must, however, true to your womanly conduct, have a mutual dialogue with Urvashi and the other nymphs. Be hospitable," is what he is saying. Close quote. Deeply insulted, Kali vows to return after shedding her darkness and later admonishes Shiva and says, quote, this is from Kalika Puran, okay? "One should not be ridiculed because of one's low caste, poverty, bad appearance, lack of generosity, and having one limb less." I'm interested, Devdutt, what do you think in this consideration of the lesser folk, the dark, the disenfranchised, the wounded, the maimed?
So, when we are looking at the idea of darkness in India, it's Shyama Varna and Gauranga, Karpura Gauranga. Karpura is camphor. Black and white is a metaphor which is used constantly. So, Ganga is white, Yamuna is black. Krishna is white, Balaram is white. Shiva is white and Vishnu is black. Gauri is white, Kali is black. So typically black and white are form of a spectrum. But this Kalika Puran was written somewhere around the 10th, 12th, later century towards Assam side, and there is this kind of this is more social issues coming into the picture, because you have a new social order emerging, which is highly feudal, which didn't exist before. And the kings are now positioning themselves as purer, better, cleaner, and the gods are being washed continuously. The Abhishek rituals are happening, and the unwashed are being kept away. So clearly, these are new ecosystems emerging in society. And the idea being that what we call today diversity and inclusion, like a 21st century invention, is not a 21st century invention. These are ideas where the goddess is demanding inclusion of diversity. And this is a constant idea you start seeing from the 5th and 6th century. As feudalism emerges in India, which is around 5th century, mercantile societies collapse, feudal societies rise. You have this marginalization of society, the feudal lord, the farm, the cultivated land, the temple which is pure, and the other, which is outside the crematorium, the charnel ground, the forest. And there is this language which emerges, which is saying everything is the goddess. This and that, both are the goddess. You can't say this is the goddess and that is not the goddess. And that's what these stories are trying to communicate. Urvashi is the goddess. So is Kali, so is Durga. Therefore, these spectrum of goddesses. So if you look at the names of the goddesses, like Sodasi, 16-year-old.
16-year-old, Mahavidya.
So, or is Kamala, like a lotus flower. A lotus flower is clearly referring to her puberty status. There is the mother, there is the crone, so the whole age group of women. And by showing this spectrum, it's what we call today diversity and inclusion.
Certainly. I'm wanting to ask you a little bit about the figure of the mother.
Ji.
All right, because that is, in Bengal, this is a heavy-bodied.
Yes.
She's also erotic.
Yes.
She's also inaccessible. How is, and the poet can infantilize.
Himself, yeah.
Chandidas writes a poem which dedicates 50 verses to the breasts of Kali.
Yeah.
How does this fit in with the larger spectrum of, say, male-to-male worship? The devotee to Shiva, the devotee to Vishnu. What is this?
So the bhakti movement starts, and it has many layers. But typically, when you think bhakti, you think of the male gods, and usually Krishna and Ram. They become Vaishnavism is the big bhakti thing. Shiva is there, but not as big as the Vaishnav parampara. And the Nirguni and all that. But in Bengal, you have this bhakti movement taking a very unique form. It's very unique to Bengal. You don't really find bhakti and the goddess coming together except in Bengali poetry. Everywhere else, goddess is awesome. She is Adbhuta or Vibhits Rasa. But Bhakti Rasa is not there. Bhakti Rasa, even when you see the Tamil works and all that, there is awe, there is majesty, there is power. But Bhakti, although they'll refer to as Amma, which is a standard phrase, this kind of Bhakti has to have a emotion, and Vatsalya Ras is very important. So Krishna is Vatsalya Ras, and Keshto Kali, the Kali is the, Keshto is the Krishna and Vaishnavism and vegetarian. Kali is dark, she is non-vegetarian, she likes alcohol, she is tribal, she is subaltern. And these two faiths are there in Assam, Angavanga Kalinga, so the whole eastern belt. And it's very difficult, and what is happening is they don't know how to deal with this tribal erotic identity. And therefore these men, if you see the artwork, I mean, one doesn't have to be explicit about it, but you can see the discomfort with nudity, the discomfort with eroticism. Shiva's penis, how do you show it? Should you show it, not show it? Is it erect, not erect? Why is he below? It's not the opposite of the missionary position. It is called Viparitarati, where the woman is on top. That's the only way in art you can show female agency. In art, the only way to show female agency in a sexual act is to show her on top. Sorry, adults in the room, I hope. Yeah, no children and so on. Just disclaimer. And trigger alert and all that. So, but Kali show, I think trigger alert is already out there. So, but if you don't understand this tantric thing, we must understand that Buddhism and Jainism were very big, and their sex and violence were considered bad. And this is a reaction to it, where sex and violence are seen as sources of siddha, power. And the rejection of the female form comes with a vengeance around the even earlier. But as in Madhya Pradesh, for example, since you referred to Madhya Pradesh, you have the Chausashti Yogini temples. And they are the early forms of these goddesses, and we don't really know much about it. You talk to art historians, it's a mystery. These are these wild women, killing bears, playing with children, cooking food, hunting lions. It's the strange 64 women structures you find in Odisha, Chhattisgarh, tribal belt. And I think that's where these goddesses come from. But by the 16th and 17th century, you have the Mughals coming in, you have the British coming in. All this is shaping the male gaze. The tribals had no problem with the nude body. That nudity was not a concept. To cover your body, to how do you cover your body. The erotic was nothing to talk about. It was like today I was hearing a scholar reciting a poetry of Bhakta Sarabega saying from Odisha, where he's making love to his beloved, and he's wondering, he has to go to the temple at the same time, and he's wondering what to do, and he says, no, God will be happy if I go there satisfied, having satisfied you. Now this kind of poetry you can't write in the 21st century, where it's so casually being mentioned, the Lord will be happy if I am happy and I've made you happy, he'll be very happy. And of course I'm using a very censored language. So, and I think that's the world where these poets came from, and they didn't know how to deal with this very comfort with intimacy, eroticism. It's not consumerism, it's not objectivism, it is a very different energy. And I think that's what they're trying to deal with, and they don't know how to deal with it. So mother becomes safe, Indian men and mummies. So mummy becomes safe, and of course you can read too much Freudian into it, which I don't want to. But the Chamunda image is dark and gaunt, the opposite of a fleshy, buxom mother. Ornaments, Kali does not have ornaments, she's Rundamala, and you pointed out how the patrons are showing off their wealth. So you're seeing this discomfort, and I think this great thing to observe the artist struggling. You can visualize the artist wondering, how far do I go? How far do I go? So the ghungru in Kali's feet for me was like, it's like putting taking away the freedom. Because ghungru is for someone, the goddess will dance whether she likes it or not with anything. So that whole idea, these things, I mean, of course, these are conversations which we can have forever.
How many more questions? We can carry on, and you might leave, but we might carry on. There is, how much more, Ritu, would you like to tell us? Shivani?
What I meant is, if anyone wants to ask after you ask.
Yeah, we can do that. I just have one question. In the Mangalore area, there are a number of Devi temples, Durga and Kali, where like Mukambika. I'm fascinated by Mukambika, partly because it has an art connect. We know that Raja Ravi Verma, growing up in Kilimanur, tiny little princeling of a tiny little kingdom, wants to be an artist. And then what he does is he goes to Mukambika Devi. And he spends 3 days in deep meditation, and then comes out of there convinced that he has the blessings, and then he paints the painting which is in Ashish Anand's office. Which is a fabulous work. The Madhava palette work is in their collection. Oh, wow. There is an interesting line we can draw it, because this is documented. But with Mukambika Devi, she is Saraswati in the morning, Durga in the afternoon, and I think Lakshmi, or one of the two. She's 3 of them in one day. Apparently, this is the story is that when Devi comes here, she appears in the form of a lingam. There are at least 6 or 7 major temples in that Mangalore area which attribute maleness in the form of the Shivling to Devi. She owns that space. I wanted to ask you, because if you don't know, then no one will know.
No, the Mogambika temple is famous because one of the legends is that Adi Shankaracharya composed the Saundarya Lahari there. And if you go there, I have had the opportunity to go, there's a hill up there, and you can actually see, when the sun rises, you can see a carpet of clouds. Yeah. And through the carpet of clouds, the sun comes through, and you can just imagine Saundarya Lahari being composed there. So Mogambika becomes famous in the southern belt. The goddesses, this division of Gauri, Kali, Durga is not that clear.
No, and it's very recent.
Yeah, but you see, these are tribal goddesses, and yeah, there is always this. You will always have this goddess, depending on which mood you are in, how the ambivalence of it. You can make her Mangala, which is auspicious, or then she becomes Amangala. So there is this goddess always has these two sides, and in the south, that tradition in some form is maintained. This idea of the Shivalinga being a male form is really a 20th century idea. It basically means a polished stone that you pick up from the river. So the river flows, if you go to any river belt, you'll see these pebbles. So, how do you represent that which is formless? So imagine I have divinity which is infinity. So I take a piece of rock and I'm a sculpture. And I've got a rock. And I say, what do I carve divinity as? Everything you carve means you'll cut out something else. You'll cut out something. So the artist says, I will not cut it out at all. And I leave it as it is, which is called the pinda. Pinda is bindu. And I leave it as it is. And that's divinity in its most primal form. You want to call it male, you can call it male. You want to call it female, you can call it female. In order to keep it erect, you need to keep a base. So now we say male and female, and we use all kinds of languages to make us comfortable. And it's also tantalizing, right? When you say that the worship of the lingam, which is the male organ, and everybody gets excited, and I'm like, clearly you'll have still juvenile. And it's just the form of the formless. And the goddess in many cultures, when I have to give form to the formless, which form do I choose? Do I choose a plant? Do I choose an animal? Do I choose a human? If human, do I take male? Do I take female? And these are questions that we ask even today. What do I connect with? What image I want to see? And therefore they say, okay, fine, put the pinda over there, that's the deity. You decide what you want to be. And therefore it can be male, it can be female. In Mathura you go, Shivji is dressed as Gopeshwar Mahadev. There's a nut. And not everywhere in Mathura you go, Shivji is always shown with a nose ring. Now, is that a female form? Is it androgynous? Is it queer? जो तुमको अच्छा लगता है, जिससे श्रद्धा बढ़ती है. You know, Hindi has this beauty which English unfortunately doesn't. But श्रद्धा के लिए है. So the coast of Mangalore and the Mugambika temple, the Saraswati Peeth is very important for the goddess, because especially Mugambika is famous because I think children are taken there in the first to learn writing, the first thing that you do. So Saraswati becomes very important. Saraswati temples are very few in India. And therefore, when the Brahmin communities moved, they saw the goddess as Saraswati. And they started using this phrase of Saraswati and these three forms. Again, it's a very southern thing. You don't find it much in North India. In fact, I think Bombay has a Saraswati temple, by the way, in the business district. Built by South Indians. It's in Fort area. It's one of those rare things when I saw, I couldn't believe it is there, but there it is. So Mukambika really represents those forms, which now they have put an image over there. But really there is the Shri Yantra over there, and they say the Shankaracharya made her vegetarian. She was not a vegetarian goddess. So all South Indian goddesses, you'll always find this, are they vegetarian, are they not vegetarian? And vegetarian goddesses are the Brahminical goddesses. They have been co-opted by the pure center of the city. So Meenakshi Madurai temple is vegetarian, but she's a Kshatriya, she will eat everything. So there are temples of Mariamma outside where you get the best rabbit meat. So
Wonderful.